Welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to talk about a movie that brought laughs, disguises, drama, and a whole lot of comedy together in one entertaining package. The movie is Big Mommas, Like Father, Like Son, released in the year 2011. This is an American crime comedy film, and it holds a very special place in the Big Momma film franchise because it is the third and final installment of the entire Big Momma trilogy. The first film in this franchise was Big Momma's House, which came out back in the year 2000, and then the second movie Big Momma's House 2 followed in 2006. After 5 years, the story returned one last time with this film, and this time it came with a new twist because now the main character was not going undercover alone. This time he had company, and that company made things twice as chaotic and twice as funny. The film is an American production, meaning it was made in the United States of America. It was filmed primarily in the state of Georgia, which allowed the production to take advantage of local tax incentives and reduce the overall budget. The language of the film is English, and it was produced under the banner of multiple production companies including Regency Enterprises, New Regency, Friendly Films, Runteldat Entertainment, The Collective, and Dune Entertainment. The movie was distributed worldwide by 20th Century Fox, one of the most iconic and well-known film distribution studios in Hollywood history. The film was directed by John Whitesell, written by Matthew Fogel with the story developed by both Matthew Fogel and Don Reimer, and the original characters were created by Daryl Quarles. The film was produced by David T. Friendly and Michael Green. The cinematography was handled by Anthony B. Richmond, and the editing was done by Priscilla Ned Friendly. The musical score of the film was composed by David Newman, whose work helped set the tone for the comedic and action-filled sequences throughout the movie. In terms of runtime, the theatrical version of this film runs for approximately 107 minutes. However, an extended and unrated cut was also made available on DVD under the title The Motherlode Edition, which added 5 minutes of extra footage including a song and dance musical number, and slightly longer edits of various scenes throughout the film. The movie carries a rating of PG-13, which means it was designed for a general audience but with some content that may not be appropriate for very young children. The budget for this film was set at $32 million, which was actually lower than the budgets of the previous two films. The reason for this reduction was that the lead actor Martin Lawrence personally agreed to take a pay cut in order to help the production move forward, and the Georgia tax incentives further brought down the costs. Despite the modest budget, the film managed to perform well commercially at the global box office, which we will talk more about when we discuss the release section. Plot details. Now let us get into the actual story of the film, because the plot is what truly makes this movie interesting. The story begins with FBI Special Agent Malcolm Turner, who is feeling very good about life. His teenage stepson Trent Pierce has just received acceptance to attend the prestigious Duke University, and Malcolm sees this as a major achievement for the family. He wants Trent to go to college, get an education, and build a proper future for himself. However, Trent has very different plans in mind. Trent is a rapper who performs under the stage name Prodigy, and his dream is to pursue a music career rather than go to university. Since Trent is still underage at this point in the story, he needs an adult to sign a recording contract on his behalf, and the only person who can do that is Malcolm. But Malcolm refuses completely because he believes education should come first. Frustrated by his stepfather's decision, Trent and his best friends come up with a plan to go to Malcolm's workplace and ambush him there to force the signature. This impulsive decision leads Trent directly into the middle of a dangerous federal operation. At the same time, Malcolm is actively trying to catch a violent Russian gang member named Cherkov. To do this, he is using a criminal informant named Canetti. The plan was for Canetti to deliver a flash drive to the gang as part of a sting operation, but the flash drive delivered is actually empty. The real flash drive, the one containing all the critical information, has been hidden by Kennedy with a friend at the Georgia Girls' School for the Arts. Before anything can be done about this, the situation spirals out of control. During the exchange, Connety's cover is blown and he is shot and killed right in front of Trent, who witnessed everything. This means Trent is now in serious danger because the Russian gang now knows he saw everything. Malcolm quickly rescues Trent and the two of them escape, but Trent's car was left behind at the scene of the crime. Since the gang can trace the vehicle back to Trent, Malcolm realizes they are now targets, and the only safe option is to go undercover. Malcolm then does what he has done before in previous missions. He transforms himself into his deep cover alter ego, a large elderly woman named Hattie Mae Big Momma Pierce, who is the grandmother of his wife Sherry. But this time, Malcolm also disguises Trent, dressing him up as an overweight young woman named Charmaine Daisy Pierce, who is supposed to be Big Momma's great-niece. With both disguises in place, Big Momma takes a position as a house mother at the Georgia Girls' School for the Arts, and Charmaine is enrolled as a regular student at the school. The mission is to find the hidden flash drive before the Russian gang does. Once inside the school, things get complicated very quickly. Trent, who is now disguised as Charmaine, is surrounded by young women his own age and constantly struggles to keep his cover intact. He eventually befriends a talented and kind girl named Haley Robinson, and the two develop a genuine connection. As the story progresses, Trent begins to actually develop romantic feelings for Haley, which makes maintaining the female disguise even more difficult and awkward. Meanwhile, Malcolm, as Big Momma, is navigating her own set of complications. The headmistress of the school announces that a historic music box has been stolen from the school's library. Malcolm quickly figures out that this music box is actually where the real flash drive is hidden inside. As he investigates, he runs into the school's security guard, a man named Curtis Cool, who immediately takes a romantic interest in Big Momma and begins pursuing her aggressively. Malcolm then notices a photograph of Curtis with Kennedy, the now dead informant, and realizes that Curtis is the friend Kennedy mentioned hiding the flash drive with. Things get more dangerous on Trent's side of the story as well. The Russian gang members approach Trent's best friends outside the school, disguising themselves as music producers. They convince the friends to inform them of Trent's location, unaware that they are actually leading dangerous criminals straight to him. Trent manages to arrange a secret date with Haley by briefly stepping out of his Charmaine disguise and spending time with her as his real self. The date goes very well, and Haley encourages Trent to consider going to college and pursuing his dreams through education alongside music. However, an accidental encounter with his friends during this date alerts the gang members, who begin to follow and tail them closely. Back inside the school, Big Momma manages to gain the trust and affection of several students by offering genuine advice and emotional comfort to them during difficult personal moments. This allows Malcolm to gather more information about what is really going on at the school. He eventually discovers the truth about the stolen music box. It was not taken by a student with criminal motives. It was actually stolen by Haley herself, and she did it purely to gain membership into the Divas, an elite group of top-performing artists at the school. As the school's big annual showcase performance approaches, Malcolm forces Trent to stay in his Charmaine disguise even on stage. Trent had been helping Haley rehearse her musical performance, and had turned it into a duet meant to be performed together. But when Trent breaks character in the middle of the performance, the disguise is ruined, the performance falls apart, and Haley walks off stage feeling humiliated and betrayed. As Haley storms off and Trent tries to go after her to explain everything, the gang members arrive at the school and a high-speed chase begins. In the chaos, Trent manages to actually recover the flash drive from the music box. But just as he does, the gang members surround him and hold him at gunpoint. Big Momma jumps in to help, and both of them attempt to escape, but they are caught again. At this critical moment, Malcolm's disguise is completely blown. Just as the villain Cherkoff is about to kill both Malcolm and Trent, the security guard Curtis Cool arrives at the right moment, and uses a taser to save them both, bringing the entire criminal operation to an end. In the aftermath, Trent and Haley make peace with each other, and Trent finally explains the truth about everything. Malcolm, as promised, agrees to sign Trent's music contract. But in a surprising and touching final moment, Trent himself tears up the contract, revealing that after everything he experienced during this mission, and especially after his growing relationship with Haley and the conversations they had, he has decided on his own to attend college after all. The film closes with Malcolm and Trent making a quiet agreement between themselves to keep the entire undercover adventure a complete secret from Sherry, Malcolm's wife, and Trent's mother. Cast details. The cast of this film features a strong lineup of talented actors who brought the story to life in a very memorable way. Martin Lawrence leads the film in the central role of FBI Special Agent Malcolm Turner, and he also portrays Big Momma, the disguised elderly woman character that has defined this entire franchise. Martin Lawrence is one of the most well-known comedic actors in Hollywood and has a long career built on both stand-up comedy and film. He was the only cast member who returned from the original 2 films in the lead role, and he once again delivered the physical comedy and charm that made the Big Momma character so popular with audiences. Brandon T. Jackson plays the role of Trent Pierce, Malcolm's rebellious and music-obsessed teenage stepson, and he also plays the character of Charmaine, Trent's female disguise inside the school. Brandon T. Jackson is both an actor and a stand-up comedian, and he brought a lot of natural energy and humor to the role. The character of Trent had previously appeared in both of the earlier films in the franchise, but was played by a different actor, Jaska Washington, in those installments. For this 3rd film, the role was recast and given to Brandon T. Jackson, who brought a fresh and different personality to the character. Jessica Lucas plays the important supporting role of Haley Robinson, the talented young student who befriends Charmaine and develops a genuine romantic connection with Trent. Jessica Lucas gave the character warmth and sincerity, making the emotional side of the story feel real and grounded even within the broader comedic setting. Portia Doubleday appears in the role of Jasmine, one of the students at the all-girls school. Michelle Ong plays the character of Mia, and Emily Rios portrays Isabel, both of whom are students at the Georgia Girls School for the Arts. Tony Curran takes on the role of the primary antagonist, Cherkov, the dangerous Russian gang leader who serves as the main threat throughout the story. Faison Love plays Curtis Kuhl, the school's security guard who relentlessly pursues Big Momma romantically, providing some of the film's most comedic moments. It is worth noting that Faison Love appeared in the film in an uncredited role. Ken Jeong, well known for his roles in popular comedy films and television, appears in the film as the mailman in a smaller but notable supporting appearance. Anna Ortiz plays the role of Gail Fletcher, Sherry Shepard plays Beverly Townsend, and Max Casella portrays Anthony Canetti, the criminal informant whose death sets the entire story in motion. Mark John Jeffries appears as Rembrandt, and Brandon Gill plays the character of Scratch. Release date and box office. Big Mommas, Like Father, Like Son was officially released in North America on February 18, 2011. The principal photography for the film had begun back in April 2010, so the production moved at a fairly steady pace from filming to final release. On its opening weekend in the United States, the film ranked number 5 at the domestic box office and earned approximately $16.3 million from 2,821 theaters across the country. By the time its theatrical run was complete, the film had grossed approximately $37.9 million in the United States alone and an additional $44.7 million from international markets, bringing the total worldwide gross to approximately $82.7 million. This was a significant achievement considering the film was made on a budget of only $32 million, meaning it more than doubled its budget at the global box. On the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, the film received an approval rating that reflected the critical consensus that while the movie had its moments of comedy, it largely failed to meet the standard of the original films in the franchise. Despite this critical reception, audiences who enjoyed the first two Big Momma films found enough entertainment in this third chapter to make it worth their time. Trailer and promotional information. In terms of promotion, the film had an official theatrical trailer that was released ahead of the February 2011 launch date, and showcased the central comedic premise of both Malcolm and Trent going undercover in disguise at the all-girls school. The trailer highlighted the physical comedy elements of the film, the chase sequences, the disguise gags, and the relationship between the father and son duo. A music video titled, "I'ma Do It Big," was released on February 9, 2011, just days before the film's release, as part of the promotional campaign. The song was performed by Brandon T. Jackson and featured collaborations with One Chance and the well-known musical artist T-Pain. An official soundtrack album was also released on February 15th. Final thoughts. Big Mommas. Like Father, Like Son is a film that works best when you understand exactly what it is trying to be. It is not a deeply complex thriller or an award-winning drama. It is a light-hearted, family-oriented comedy that leans heavily into physical humor, disguised comedy, and the entertaining dynamic between a father and his son who are forced into an impossible situation together. The relationship between Malcolm and Trent is the true emotional core of the movie. Beneath all the wigs, padded suits, and outrageous undercover antics, there is a story about a stepfather who wants the best for his son and a young man who eventually learns to appreciate the guidance he is being given. The film wraps up the Big Momma franchise in a way that gives both characters a satisfying conclusion and leaves audiences with a smile. Whether you are a longtime Big Mommas, Like Father, Like Son, 2011, complete story. The beginning, a father's dream and a son's ambition. The story of Big Mommas, Like Father, Like Son begins in a place of excitement and pride. FBI Special Agent Malcolm Turner is a man who has dedicated his entire career to law enforcement, justice, and protecting the people around him. He is not just a federal agent, he is also a stepfather, and like any loving parent, he carries enormous hopes and dreams for his stepson. When the story opens, Malcolm receives the news he has been waiting for. His 17-year-old stepson, Trent Pierce, has been officially accepted to attend Duke University, one of the most respected and prestigious academic institutions in the entire United States. For Malcolm, this moment represents everything. It means his son has a future. Trent Pierce, however, sees things very differently. Trent is a young man full of energy, creativity, and big dreams, but those dreams have nothing to do with college classrooms or university degrees. Trent is a rapper. He performs under the stage name, Prodigy, and genuinely believes that music is his calling and his future. He is passionate about his craft and convinced that he has the talent to make it in the music industry. The problem is that Trent is still underage, which means he cannot legally sign a recording contract on his own. He needs a guardian to sign on his behalf, and the only person in his life who can legally do that is Malcolm refuses without hesitation. As far as he is concerned, music is not a stable plan and college is not optional. He wants Trent to have security, and he firmly believes that education is the only path to that security. The two of them clash over this difference in vision, and the tension between them begins to build. Malcolm stands his ground, Trent feels dismissed and misunderstood, and the argument ends without any resolution. Trent, frustrated and feeling like his dream is being shut down by the one person who should be supporting him, comes up with a different strategy. He talks to his best friends about the situation, and together they hatch a reckless plan. If Malcolm will not listen to Trent at home, then Trent will go directly to Malcolm's workplace and confront him there. The idea is impulsive and poorly thought through, but Trent is young and determined, and he convinces himself it will work. The mission goes wrong, a witness to murder. At the same time that this family conflict is unfolding, Malcolm is in the middle of a very serious and dangerous federal operation. He is actively working to bring down a violent and powerful Russian criminal named Cherkov, a gang leader who operates with ruthlessness and without mercy. To get close to Cherkov and gather the evidence needed to take him down, Malcolm has been working with a criminal informant named Anthony Canetti. The plan they have arranged involves Canetti delivering a flash drive to the Russian gang as part of a carefully orchestrated sting. The flash drive being delivered, however, is actually empty. It is a decoy. The real flash drive, the one that contains all the crucial intelligence and incriminating information, has been hidden by Canetti somewhere safe. Canetti has placed the real flash drive with a trusted friend who is connected to the Georgia Girls' School for the Arts, a private all-girls performing arts school. The plan is built around this exchange, and Malcolm is watching everything from a distance as the operation unfolds. Then everything falls apart. During the exchange, something goes wrong and Canetti's cover as an informant is blown. The Russian gang members realize immediately that they have been set up and that Canetti has been working with the FBI. What follows is violent and swift. Canetti is shot and killed before Malcolm can intervene and save him. The operation collapses in an instant, and what makes the situation dramatically worse is that Trent, following through on his plan to ambush Malcolm at work, has shown up at exactly the wrong place at exactly the wrong time. Trent witnesses the murder of Anthony Canetti with his own eyes. He sees everything. He is now a witness to a killing committed by dangerous members. Malcolm moves quickly. He reaches Trent, and the two of them manage to escape from the scene before the gang members can get to them. But as they flee, a critical problem becomes apparent. Trent's car was left behind at the scene of the crime. The gang members will find that vehicle, trace it back to Trent, and identify both him and Malcolm. There is no way to simply go home and act like nothing happened. The gang will come looking for them, and when they do, it will not be to have a conversation. Malcolm thinks through the situation and comes to the conclusion that the only way to keep Trent safe while simultaneously completing the mission and recovering the real flash drive is to go undercover. And Malcolm has done undercover work before. He has a disguise that has worked for him in the past, one that is completely unexpected and completely convincing. He is going to become Big Momma again. The disguises, Big Momma and Charmaine. Malcolm Turner has used the Big Momma disguise in previous operations. Big Momma is the character of Hattie Mae Pierce, the large and formidable elderly grandmother of his wife Sherry. When Malcolm transforms into Big Momma, he puts on heavy prosthetic makeup, padding, a wig, and completely embodies the personality of a sharp-tongued, no-nonsense Southern grandmother. The disguise is elaborate and physically demanding, but Malcolm has done it before and he knows how to make it work. This time, however, he cannot leave Trent behind. Malcolm creates a female disguise for Trent. Trent is dressed up as a heavy-set young woman named Charmaine Daisy Pierce, presented to the world as Big Momma's great niece. The disguise involves heavy padding, prosthetics, a wig, makeup, and an entirely different way of walking and speaking. For Trent, who is a young rapper with a strong masculine identity, being forced into this, with both disguises fully assembled, Big Momma applies for and receives the position of house mother at the Georgia Girls' School for the Arts. This role gives Malcolm complete access to the school, the students, the staff, and eventually the library where the flash drive is believed to be hidden. Charmaine is enrolled as a regular student at the school and is placed in classes and dormitory life alongside the other girls. Life inside the school, friendships, feelings, and complications. Once inside the school, both Malcolm and Trent quickly realize that maintaining their disguises is going to be far more difficult than they anticipated. The environment is intimate and social. Everyone knows everyone, conversations are personal, and there is very little room for secrets. Trent, as Charmaine, is immediately placed in the middle of student social life. He attends classes, sits in the dormitory, participates in rehearsals, and has to interact naturally with young women his own age at all times. However, Trent does manage to form a genuine connection with one particular student named Haley Robinson. Haley is a talented and passionate young musician who is kind, honest, and emotionally warm. She treats Charmaine with genuine friendliness, and over time, Trent finds himself truly enjoying her company and opening up to her in ways he did not expect. He begins to care about Haley not as part of the mission but as a real person. He starts helping her prepare for the school's upcoming major event, a large annual performance called the Showcase, and the two of them work on her musical act together, turning it into a duet. The more time Trent spent, Malcolm, as Big Momma, is dealing with his own set of challenges on the faculty side of the school. He is playing the role of house mother, which means he is responsible for the girls in his care, for their emotional well-being, for maintaining order in the dormitory, and for navigating relationships with the school's headmistress and staff. Malcolm discovers fairly early into the operation that the headmistress has made a troubling announcement to the school. A historic and valuable music box has been stolen from the school's library, and no one knows who took it. Malcolm thinks carefully about this and quickly connects the dots. While investigating the library and searching for clues about the missing music box, Malcolm encounters the school's security guard, a large and enthusiastic man named Curtis Cool. Curtis takes an immediate and very strong romantic interest in Big Momma. He is attracted to her from the moment they meet and begins pursuing her persistently, offering to give her tours of the school, showering her with compliments, and looking for every possible opportunity to spend time with her. Malcolm finds this deeply uncomfortable and spends a great deal of energy trying to redirect Curtis's attention without blowing his cover. But during one of these uncomfortable encounters, Malcolm notices something significant. In Curtis's office, there's a photograph on display, and in that photograph, Curtis is standing alongside Anthony Canetti, the murdered informant. This confirms what Malcolm had hoped. Curtis is. The danger closes in. The gang tightens its grip. While Malcolm is working through the investigation inside the school and Trent is navigating his increasingly complicated feelings for Haley, the Russian gang members are not sitting still outside. They are actively searching for Trent, and they find a way to get to him through people he trusts. The gang members locate Trent's best friends from outside the school and approach them with a story. Posing as music producers interested in signing a new rapper, they earn the trust of Trent's friends and then casually ask about his whereabouts. Trent's friends, having no idea who they are actually talking to and believing that these men might be able to help Trent's music career, agree to pass along. The situation becomes even more tense when Trent decides to take a significant risk. He has developed such strong feelings for Haley that he arranges to step out of his Charmaine disguise for an evening and spend time with her as his real self, Trent Pierce. He keeps the details vague, not explaining who he truly is or why he has been living as Charmaine, but he lets her see him as a young man rather than as the female student she has befriended. The date goes very well. Haley enjoys his company, and the conversation they share is genuine and meaningful. During this time together, Haley talks to him about the importance of pursuing education alongside his other dreams, encouraging him. But during this secret outing, Trent runs into his friends, and that accidental encounter is all the gang members need. They were already watching the friends, and now they begin tailing Trent directly. Trent realizes what is happening and quickly changes back into his Charmaine disguise before the gang members can get a clear look at him. The disguise throws them off for the moment. The truth about the music box. Back inside the school, Malcolm's investigation finally leads him to a breakthrough, though not the one he expected. After spending considerable time gaining the genuine trust and affection of the students in his care, listening to their problems, offering advice, and being the kind of warm and understanding authority figure that they feel safe talking to, Malcolm eventually learns the truth about who stole the music box from the library. The thief was not a faculty member, a gang operative, or anyone with criminal connections. Haley had stolen the music box for a reason that had nothing to do with the flash drive inside it. She had no idea the flash drive was even there. She took the box because she desperately wanted to become a member of an elite group of students at the school known as the Divas. The Divas are the most respected and celebrated performers at the Georgia Girls' School for the Arts, and gaining membership into this group is something Haley has wanted very badly. Stealing the music box was the act she believed would prove her worthiness and earn her a place among them. It was a poor decision born from social pressure and the desire to belong, not from any criminal intent. Malcolm now knows exactly where the music box is, and he knows it is in Haley's possession, which means recovering the flash drive means going through the one person that Trent cares most about. The showcase. Everything falls apart at once. The annual showcase event arrives, and it is the biggest night of the school calendar. Students have been preparing for weeks, and the entire faculty and student body is present. Trent and Haley have been working together on a musical duet that they are supposed to perform together at the showcase. But because Malcolm knows the gang is closing in, and because they still need the flash drive, he insists that Trent remain in his Charmaine disguise throughout the entire event. This means that the duet Trent and Haley planned together will have to be performed by Charmaine and Haley, not by Trent and Haley. The performance begins, and for a brief time, it holds together. But the pressure on Trent is simply too great. He is standing on stage next to the girl he genuinely cares about, performing a musical number that they created together, and he cannot keep pretending to be someone else. He breaks character in the middle of the performance. The disguise begins to fall apart visibly, and the performance collapses with it. The audience is confused, the performance is ruined, and Haley is left standing on stage feeling humiliated, betrayed, and deeply confused about who the person beside her actually is. She storms off stage, hurt and angry, and Trent desperately wants to go after her and explain everything, but the situation immediately spirals into chaos before he can. The final confrontation, chase, capture, and resolution. The moment the showcase falls apart, the Russian gang members, who have been tracking Trent, arrive at the school. The situation immediately shifts from awkward social disaster to genuine physical danger. A chase breaks out within the school, with Malcolm and Trent trying to stay ahead of the gang while simultaneously trying to locate and recover the flash drive from the music box. In the chaos and confusion of the chase, Trent actually manages to get his hands on the music box and retrieve the flash drive from inside it. For a moment, it seems like they might succeed. But the gang members surround Trent before he can safely escape with it. With the flash drive in his hand, Trent finds himself at gunpoint, trapped and outnumbered by violent criminals. Big Momma, seeing her great-nephew in danger, intervenes immediately. Malcolm, still in full disguise, throws himself into the situation and tries to create an escape route for both of them. There is a brief and chaotic struggle as the two of them attempt to fight their way free. But the gang members are too many and too organized. Both Malcolm and Trent are captured once again, and in the struggle, Malcolm's Big Momma disguise is completely and definitively blown. There is no longer any pretense. Cherkoff and his gang know exactly who they are dealing with, a federal agent and his stepson. Cherkoff moves in for the kill, and the situation looks genuinely hopeless. Then, at the last possible moment, Curtis Cool arrives. The lovable and persistent school security guard, who has been pursuing Big Momma romantically throughout the entire film, shows up with a taser and uses it to stop Cherkoff and the gang members. His arrival is completely unexpected and turns the tide of the confrontation in an instant. The gang is subdued, Cherkoff is stopped, the aftermath, reconciliation and a surprising choice. With the criminal operation concluded, the gang stopped, and the flash drive safely recovered, the immediate danger has passed. But there are still personal matters to resolve. Trent goes to find Haley and finally tells her the truth. He explains who he actually is, why he was disguised as Charmaine, what the mission was about, and most importantly, that the friendship and the feelings he developed for her during their time at the school were completely genuine. He was not pretending to care about her. Everything they shared, the conversations, the music, the laughter, the encouragement she gave him about his future, all of it was real. After all of this, Malcolm sits down with Trent to have the conversation they have been building towards since the very beginning of the film. Malcolm, as he promised and as he felt was fair, agrees to sign Trent's recording contract. He takes the papers in hand, ready to give Trent the one thing he came to Malcolm asking for in the first place. But then something remarkable happens. Trent takes the contract back and tears it up himself. He does not want it anymore, or rather, his priorities have shifted. After everything he went through inside that school, after truly listening to Haley's perspective on education, after experiencing firsthand the value of expanding himself beyond what he already knows, and after seeing what real dedication and hard work looks like in the environment of the art school, Trent has made a decision on his own. He is going to college. He is going to Duke University. It is a moment of real character growth for Trent, and it gives the film an emotional resolution that goes beyond the comedy and the action. The two of them, stepfather and son, look at each other with a new level of mutual respect. They have been through something extraordinary together. They shared danger, discomfort, embarrassment, and fear, and they came out the other side with a better understanding of each other. Before the film ends, Malcolm and Trent make one final agreement between themselves. Everything that happened, every moment of the undercover operation, every disguise, every awkward encounter, every close call with the Russian gang, all of it stays between the two of them. Sherry, Malcolm's wife and Trent's mother, is never going to hear a single word about any of it. With that quiet agreement sealed between a stepfather and his son, the story of Big Mommas, like father, like son, comes to its warm and satisfying close. Big Mommas, like father, like son, 2011, remaining actors' life history. Faison Love. Faison Andre Love was born under the birth name Langston Faison Santissima on June 14, 1968, in Santiago de Cuba, Cuba. His birthplace alone tells a significant part of his early story, because being born in Cuba to a family that would eventually relocate to the United States meant that from the very beginning of his life, he was shaped by movement, cultural diversity, and the experience of navigating more than one world at a time. His father served in the United States Navy, which was the reason for the family's eventual move from Cuba to American soil. Military families live lives defined by relocation and adaptation, and Faison's childhood was very much defined by exactly that kind of constant transition. The family settled first in southeast San Diego, California, which is an area with its own rich and complex urban identity, and then later relocated to Newark, New Jersey, a city known for its grit, its culture, and the particular kind of street-level energy that shapes the personalities of the people who grow up there. Growing up between San Diego and Newark gave Faison Love an unusually broad cultural perspective for a young person. He was exposed to very different communities, different social dynamics, different ways of speaking and moving through the world, and all of that variety fed directly into the observational sharpness that would later become one of the defining qualities of his comedic work. His multicultural upbringing, combined with the discipline and structure that came from living in a military household, created a young man who was simultaneously adaptable and grounded, someone who could read a room quickly and respond to it in ways that were natural and genuine. His father's military background instilled certain values around discipline and perseverance that stayed with Faison throughout his life, even as he chose to channel them in a very different direction from anything the military world could have anticipated. Faison attended Morse High School in San Diego, and it was during his school years that his gift for comedy began to announce itself clearly and unmistakably. By the time he was 15 years old, he was already performing comedic acts in front of his classmates, turning the ordinary hallways and classrooms of his school into a kind of informal stage where he could practice the timing and delivery that would eventually become his professional tools. What made this particular period especially significant was the role played by one of his English teachers. Rather than discouraging the behavior or treating it as a distraction, his English teacher recognized what was happening and actively encouraged it. The teacher made a specific arrangement with Faison that if his academic work was completed satisfactorily, he would be allowed to perform for the class at the end of the day. That simple act of institutional encouragement from a teacher who understood what a young person needed gave Faison a structured outlet for his talent, and helped him understand that what he was doing had real value beyond just making friends laugh. After graduating from high school, Faison made the decision to pursue comedy and entertainment professionally and relocated to New York City, which was at the time one of the most electric and competitive environments for stand-up comedy in the entire country. New York in the late 1980s and early 1990s was home to a vibrant comedy scene that was producing some of the most important voices in American entertainment, and arriving there as a young aspiring comedian meant being surrounded by intensity, ambition, and the constant pressure of proving yourself in front of demanding urban audiences. Faison threw himself into that environment with determination, and his talent and personality were strong enough to open doors relatively quickly for someone so early in his career. At 19 years old, he made his off-Broadway debut as an actor at the Harlem National Black Theater, appearing in a production called Bitter Heart Midtown, which was a modernized and creatively reimagined retelling of Charles Dickens' classic novel Great Expectations. Landing an off-Broadway role at 19, especially at a venue as respected and culturally significant as the Harlem National Black Theater, was a genuine achievement that spoke to both his raw talent and his ability to translate his natural comedic energy into a more formal theatrical context. The production introduced him. His first major motion picture opportunity arrived through a set of very unusual circumstances. In 1992, the animated comedy film BB's Kids was in production. The film was based on material created by the comedian Robin Harris, who had been celebrated for his unique storytelling voice and his ability to paint vivid and hilarious pictures of everyday Black American life. However, Robin Harris passed away suddenly before the production of the animated film could begin, and the filmmakers needed someone who could provide a vocal impression of him convincing enough to honor his legacy and bring the material to life. Faison Love was called in to provide that voice, and his performance was praised for capturing something genuine and warm in the impression, while not the break that truly elevated his career from promising to establish came through his connection with the actor and filmmaker Robert Townsend. An assistant to Townsend happened to see Faison performing his stand-up comedy act, and was immediately impressed enough to recommend him for a role in one of Townsend's upcoming productions. Townsend gave Faison a role in the 1993 film The Meteor Man, a superhero comedy that introduced him to a wider audience. The relationship between the two men deepened from there, and when Townsend launched his sitcom The Parenthood on the WB network in 1995, Faison was cast in the recurring role of Wendell Wilcox, Townsend's character's childhood friend and neighbor. The role became a regular part of the show from the fall of 19, but the role that cemented him as a genuine comedic presence in Hollywood came in 1995 with his appearance in the film Friday, written by and starring Ice Cube. Friday was a sharp, funny, and culturally precise portrait of a day in the life of two young men in South Central Los Angeles, and it became one of the defining comedies of that decade. Faison played the character of Debo, or rather a drug-dealing ice cream man character in his scene with Chris Tucker's Smokey, and his presence was funny, memorable, and perfectly calibrated to the specific world the film was depicting. Friday became a cultural phenomenon. From that point forward, he built a filmography that demonstrated both his versatility and his ability to bring something distinctively his own to every role he inhabited. He appeared in Made in 2001, a crime comedy directed by Jon Favreau and starring Vince Vaughn and Favreau himself. That same relationship with Favreau led to a memorable supporting role in the beloved holiday film Elf in 2003, where Faison played the sharp-tongued and perpetually exasperated manager of the department store Santa's. His scenes in Elf were among the most quoted and remembered in the entire film, showcasing his ability to be hilarious without overplaying a moment. He also appeared in Wonderland in 2003, playing the imposing bodyguard of a nightclub kingpin in a film that depicted the infamous Wonderland Avenue murders in Los Angeles. He appeared in The Fighting Temptations in 2003 as a prison warden, demonstrating his range by playing authority within a comedic framework. One of the most unexpected and culturally significant contributions of Faison Love's career came not from a film or a television series but from the world of video games. He provided the voice of Sean "Sweet" Johnson in Grand Theft Auto: San Andreas, one of the most commercially successful and culturally influential video games ever produced. The game sold tens of millions of copies worldwide and introduced Faison's voice to an entirely new and massive audience that extended far beyond the traditional reach of his film and television work. On a personal level, Faison Love has always maintained a degree of privacy around his personal relationships, though he is known to have a daughter named Archie. Throughout his career, he has remained one of the most recognizable and consistently working character actors in Hollywood comedy, someone whose name may not always be at the top of a poster but whose presence in any film or television production immediately elevates the material around him. He has also been outspoken and unfiltered in public, qualities that have Ken Jeong. Ken Jeong is one of the most genuinely unique stories in the entire history of Hollywood, because his life before fame is as accomplished and extraordinary as the career he built in entertainment, and that is not something that can be said about very many actors working in the industry today. He was born Kendrick Kong Jo Jeong on July 13, 1969, in Detroit, Michigan, to Korean parents who had immigrated to the United States. His family's roots were in South Korea, and the values, expectations, and cultural traditions that came with that background would shape the trajectory of his early life in ways both obvious and subtle. Shortly after his birth in Detroit, the family relocated to Greensboro, North Carolina, and his father, D.K. Jeong, was a professor at North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University, and the academic environment in which Ken was raised had a direct and lasting impact on him. His father was not just an educator but a man with a notable sense of humor, and Ken has spoken openly and gratefully about inheriting his sense of comedy directly from his father, who had a gift for finding the funny side of ordinary situations and making people around him laugh through observation and wit. Growing up in a household where both academic, Ken was an exceptional student from his earliest years. He attended Walter Hines Page High School in Greensboro, where he was involved in student council, participated in the school orchestra as a violinist, competed on the IQ academic team, and distinguished himself academically to such a degree that he graduated from high school at the remarkable age of 16, several years ahead of most of his peers. That kind of academic acceleration speaks to a mind that was operating at an unusually high level, despite his obvious and genuine passion for comedy, which he nurtured by watching and studying comedians like Bill Cosby and Jim Carrey with admiring intensity. Ken followed the path that his parents encouraged and that his abilities made entirely achievable. He enrolled at Duke University in Durham, North Carolina, to pursue pre-medical studies, and he completed those studies in 1990. He then enrolled at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill School of Medicine, one of the most respected medical schools in the United States, and earned his medical doctor degree there in 1995. The level of sustained academic discipline required to move from high school graduation at 16 through pre-med studies and then through medical school is genuinely staggering. After completing his medical degree, Ken moved to New Orleans to complete his residency in internal medicine at Ochsner Medical Center. It was during this period that he began pursuing his love of comedy and theater alongside his medical career, a balancing act that required extraordinary energy and commitment on both fronts simultaneously. While he was training as a physician, he was also performing stand-up at comedy clubs in New Orleans, developing his stage voice, testing material, and building the kind of real audience experience that no classroom or rehearsal room can replicate. In 1995, shortly after earning his medical degree, following the advice and encouragement that came from winning that competition, Ken made the decision to relocate to Los Angeles. He continued practicing medicine in California while simultaneously pursuing stand-up comedy and auditioning for acting roles. He became a licensed physician in California and maintained his medical practice even as his entertainment career began to develop. He performed at comedy clubs including the Laugh Factory in West Hollywood, building his reputation within the Los Angeles comedy scene. He began making small television appearances on shows including Curb Your Enthusiasm, The Office, and HBO's Entourage, each of which his first significant film role came in 2007 when he appeared in the Judd Apatow comedy Knocked Up, playing a doctor character. The film was a major commercial and critical success, and introduced Ken to a mainstream film audience for the first time. He also appeared in Pineapple Express in 2008, another comedy that reached a large audience. But it was in 2009 that everything changed for him completely and permanently. He was cast as the unpredictable, flamboyant, and utterly unhinged Asian gangster Leslie Chow in the comedy film The Hangover, directed by Todd Phillips and starring Bradley Cooper, Ed Helms, and Zach Galifianakis. The Hangover was a phenomenon. It became one of the highest-grossing R-rated comedies in the history of American cinema, and the character of Leslie Chow was so wildly memorable and so hilariously committed that Ken Jeong became internationally famous essentially overnight. Also in 2009, he was cast in the ensemble comedy series Community on the NBC network, playing the eccentric and unpredictable Spanish teacher Ben Chang across 6 seasons of the show from 2009 to 2015. Community was a critically celebrated series that built a devoted and passionate fan base, and Ken's portrayal of Chang, a character who defied easy categorization and went through extraordinary and absurd transformations across the run of the show, became one of the most memorable performances in the entire series. Throughout the years that followed, he continued to appear in a wide variety of film and television projects. He appeared in Transformers, Dark of the Moon in 2011, Zookeeper in 2011, Pain and Gain in 2013, Ride Along 2 in 2016, and many other productions across different genres and formats. In 2019, he became one of the judges on the Fox competition series The Masked Singer, a role that allowed him to engage with a mainstream American television audience in a warm, funny, and personal way that was quite different from the more extreme and outrageous characters he had played in film and television comedy. His presence on The Masked Singer introduced him to a broader and more The personal dimension of Ken Jeong's life is defined above all by his relationship with his wife, Tran Ho, a Vietnamese-American physician whom he met during their shared time in the medical profession. The two were married in 2004 and have twin daughters together named Alexa and Zoe. Tran's own story contains a chapter that tested the entire family in a profound way, as she was diagnosed with breast cancer, a diagnosis that shook Ken deeply and caused him to seriously reconsider some of his career decisions during that period. He has spoken openly about the fact that he nearly turned down the role of Leslie Chow in The Hangover because he did not want to be away from his wife during her illness and treatment. Tran ultimately encouraged him to take the role and supported his decision fully, and her recovery from cancer was something Ken described as one of the most meaningful and transformative experiences of his life. Ken Jeong's medical license remains active and renewed as a practicing physician in California, meaning that even at the height of his fame as an actor and comedian, he has maintained the qualifications and credentials of the doctor he trained for years to become. Tony Curran. Tony Curran was born Anthony Curran on December 13, 1969, in Glasgow, Scotland, in the United Kingdom. Glasgow is Scotland's largest city, a place with a deeply distinct character that combines industrial heritage, fierce local pride, a love of football, extraordinary humor, and a cultural richness that has produced a remarkable number of artists, musicians, writers, and performers over the generations. Growing up in Glasgow means absorbing that specific energy and identity, and Tony Curran grew up specifically on the south side of the city, an area with its own The desire to perform came to Tony Curran extraordinarily early, in a way that suggests it was not a choice so much as a fundamental aspect of his personality that announced itself whether he was ready for it or not. His mother has recounted that when he was just 3 years old, an insurance man came to visit the family at their home and asked young Tony the standard question adults put to small children, asking him what he wanted to be when he grew up and offering the usual options of doctor, fireman, or footballer. According to his mother, Tony stood up with an indignant certainty and declared that he was going to be an actor. The conviction. He grew up in a working-class environment in Glasgow, and when he was 16 years old he left the south side of the city and spent time working as a postman, an experience that kept him connected to the everyday rhythms and realities of ordinary working life even as his ambitions pointed him towards something very different. This kind of direct contact with real working-class experience gave Tony a grounded quality and a natural authenticity that would become one of the defining characteristics of his acting throughout his career. Actors who have worked only within the world of entertainment from a young age often lack a certain lived-in quality, a sense of having actually existed in the world outside of rehearsal rooms and film sets, and Tony Curran has never suffered from that particular limitation. He attended Holyrood Secondary School in Glasgow, where his first encounters with the world of theatre and drama happened through the school's drama department. The department offered him his earliest structured experiences of performance in an educational context, and those experiences confirmed for him that acting was not just a vague childhood aspiration, but something he was genuinely suited to and genuinely passionate about in a way that warranted serious professional pursuit. After his schooling, he made the decision that would define the professional foundation of his career. He enrolled at the Royal Scottish Academy of Music and Drama, which is now known as the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland, one of the most prestigious performing arts institutions in the United Kingdom. His training there was rigorous, comprehensive, and built on centuries of theatrical tradition, giving him the technical skill set and artistic. His television career had actually begun before his graduation, as far back as 1986 when he appeared in 2 episodes of the television series Dramarama as a young teenager named Archie Campbell, suggesting that his talent was visible and employable even during the years when he was still developing. After graduating from the Academy in 1993, he moved into the professional world of British film, and that larger opportunity came in 1997 when he was cast in the BBC drama series This Life, a show about a group of young law graduates sharing a house in London while navigating the pressures of their professional and personal lives. The show was a significant cultural moment in British television, resonating deeply with a generation of young viewers who recognized themselves in its characters and their struggles. Tony appeared in 7 episodes of the series, and the recognition he received from that work announced him to the British television industry as a performer worth watching. From the British television world, Tony Curran began to make his move toward Hollywood, and his path into major American productions was built gradually and steadily through a series of significant supporting roles that demonstrated his extraordinary versatility. In 1999, he appeared in The 13th Warrior, an American epic adventure film starring Antonio Banderas that drew on historical and mythological source material. The film was set in the Middle Ages and required its cast to inhabit a completely different historical world with complete conviction, and from that point, his presence in major Hollywood productions grew rapidly and impressively. He appeared in Ridley Scott's Gladiator in 2000, one of the most celebrated and commercially successful epic films of that era, a film that won the Academy Award for Best Picture and starred Russell Crowe in one of the defining performances of his career. Being part of that production put Tony in company and on a scale that demonstrated how far he had traveled from Glasgow's South Side in a remarkably short time. He then appeared in Michael Bay's Pearl Harbor in 2001, another enormous Hollywood production that reached massive global audiences. In 2003, he was cast in a substantial supporting role in The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, the superhero adventure film based on the acclaimed comic book series by Alan Moore. In that film, Tony played Rodney Skinner, a version of the Invisible Man character, a role that required him to perform in a special blue-screen suit that made him essentially invisible in the finished film, with only his voice and the movements of the suit visible on screen. The technical challenges and the creative demands of playing an effectively invisible character required a very specific kind of performer, someone who could convey presence, personality, and humor through physicality and voice alone, and Tony met that challenge in a way that was widely appreciated. The same year that Underworld Evolution was released, Tony appeared in a very different kind of film that would prove to be one of the most critically significant projects of his career. Red Road was a Scottish thriller directed by Andrea Arnold, made on a modest budget and set in Glasgow's housing estates. Tony played the central male character in a tense, carefully constructed story that required him to bring a level of psychological complexity and emotional honesty to the role that was very different from the larger-scale genre work he had been doing in Hollywood. The performance was extraordinary, and it earned him the Best Actor award at the British Independent Film Awards in 2006, as well as recognition from the British Academy of Film and Television Arts, representing the highest level of critical acknowledgement available in British cinema. The contrast between appearing in a major Hollywood in 2010, he delivered what many consider to be one of his most beloved and culturally memorable performances, playing the painter Vincent van Gogh in an episode of the BBC science fiction series Doctor Who. The episode, titled Vincent and the Doctor, was written by Richard Curtis and dealt with themes of depression, artistic genius, and the tragedy of a life that ends before its creator can witness the full impact of their work on the world. Tony's portrayal of Van Gogh was received with enormous emotional warmth and critical appreciation, and the episode became one of the most beloved in the entire history of the long-running series. His ability to convey. He also appeared in X-Men: First Class in 2011, the well-received prequel entry in the X-Men franchise. He provided the voice of Captain Macmillan in the massively successful video game Call of Duty: Modern Warfare 3 in 2011, reaching yet another enormous audience through yet another medium. He continued working prolifically throughout the 2010s, appearing in the Starz series Da Vinci's Demons, in the acclaimed HBO Western series Deadwood, and its 2019 television film continuation Deadwood, the movie, in the 2016 miniseries Roots, and in the Netflix historical drama film Outlaw King in 2008. On a personal level, Tony Curran married actress Mine Gwynn in August 2011, and the couple welcomed a daughter together the following year in 2013. He has remained based in Los Angeles for significant periods of his career while maintaining his deep connection to Scotland and his identity as a Glaswegian, a quality that informs his presence and authenticity. Big Mommas. Like father, like son, the tradition of male actors playing female characters in American comedy. To fully understand the cultural context of Big Mommas, like father, like son, it is essential to first understand the long and deeply rooted tradition within American comedy of male performers disguising themselves as women for comedic purposes. This tradition did not begin with Martin Lawrence, or with the Big Momma franchise. It stretches back centuries through theatrical history, finding its roots in ancient Greek theater, where all roles including female characters were performed exclusively by male actors, and running through the Elizabethan era of English theater where the same convention applied. Shakespeare's plays were originally performed with boys and men playing every female role, a practice that shaped how those characters were written and how audiences understood gender performance on stage. The tradition carried forward into vaudeville, which was the dominant form of popular. In American film specifically, the tradition became cemented across the 20th century through a series of iconic performances that left lasting marks on popular culture. The most celebrated example in classical Hollywood was Some Like It Hot in 1959, directed by Billy Wilder and starring Marilyn Monroe, Tony Curtis, and Jack Lemmon. In that film, Curtis and Lemmon played musicians who witness a mob murder and disguised themselves as women to hide from the killers while joining an all-female band. The film is widely considered one of the greatest comedies ever made, and it established a template for the genre that influenced everything that came after it. The specific comic dynamic of a man forced to inhabit a female identity in a world that treats him as a woman. This tradition continued through the latter decades of the 20th century with films like Tootsie in 1982, starring Dustin Hoffman, in which an out-of-work actor disguises himself as a woman to land a role in a soap opera and finds that the female identity gives him access to social experiences and emotional perspectives he had never encountered as a man. Mrs. Doubtfire in 1993, starring Robin Williams, saw a divorced father disguise himself as a British female housekeeper to spend time with his children after losing custody of them, and that film became one of the most commercially successful comedies of the decade. These films were not simply comedies about cross-dressing. They were using the device of gender disguise to explore questions about identity, social performance, and the way that society treats people differently based on perceived gender. When Martin Lawrence stepped into the character of Big Momma for the first time in 2000, he was entering into this long conversation, the African American comedy film tradition. The Big Momma franchise exists within a specific and rich tradition of African American comedy cinema that had been building throughout the second half of the 20th century and accelerated dramatically during the 1990s. The 1990s in particular were an extraordinarily productive and culturally significant decade for Black American comedy in film. Films like Friday, Boomerang, House Party, The Nutty Professor, Coming to America, and many others established a space. This was a significant cultural development because for much of Hollywood's history, Black performers had been limited to supporting roles, comedic sidekicks, or caricatures that reflected white audiences' stereotypes rather than the genuine texture of Black American life. The shift that happened during the 1990s, driven by the commercial success of Black-led comedy films and the increasing power of Black producers, writers, and directors within the industry, changed the landscape in meaningful ways. Martin Lawrence was one of the central figures of that shift. His television series Martin, which ran from 1992 to 1997, was deeply embedded in Black American urban culture and spoke directly to Black audiences in a language and with references that felt completely real and familiar. When he carried the character of Big Momma herself, the large and formidable elderly Black woman who is simultaneously wise, sharp-tongued, warmly maternal, and completely unafraid of anyone or anything, is deeply rooted in a specific and beloved archetype within African American culture. The figure of the strong Black grandmother, the matriarch who holds a family or community together through sheer force of personality, practicality, and love, is one of the most enduring and culturally significant figures in Black American life and storytelling. She appears in literature, in music, in film, in family stories passed down through generations, and in the lived experience of enormous numbers of Black Americans who were raised or significantly shaped by grandmothers who embodied exactly these qualities. By building a comedy franchise around the idea of a Black FBI agent impersonating this specific kind of woman, the Big Momma films were tapping into something that carried genuine cultural weight and familiarity for their core audience. The fact that the disguise works, that Malcolm can convincingly become Big Momma and that the people around him believe in her completely, is a joke that operates on multiple levels. On the surface it is absurd physical comedy. But underneath that absurdity is a cultural recognition that the Big Momma archetype is so well understood, so clearly defined in the collective imagination, that even an impersonation can feel completely believable because the audience knows exactly what a Big Momma is and how she moves through the world. The laughter that comes from the disguise, the Big Momma franchise in context, 3 films across 11 years. The Big Momma franchise spans 11 years of American cultural history, from the first film in 2000 through the third and final installment in 2011. And understanding that span of time helps illuminate how the cultural landscape around the films shifted across their run. The original Big Momma's house arrived in the year 2000, at a moment when the African American comedy film genre was at the height of its commercial power and cultural visibility. Martin Lawrence was one of the biggest comedy stars in Hollywood at that time, writing the success of Bad Boys, Blue Streak, and his television series. The film cost approximately $30 million to make and grossed. Big Momma's House 2, which came out in 2006, arrived during a period when comedy sequels were increasingly common and when the film industry was beginning to shift its commercial strategies toward franchise building and brand extension. The sequel performed respectably but showed a modest decline from the original, which is a pattern common to most By the time Big Mommas, Like Father, Like Son arrived in 2011, the cultural environment had changed considerably from the year 2000. The 2000s had brought significant shifts in how Black American culture was represented in mainstream entertainment, with a new generation of performers, filmmakers, and television creators expanding the range and complexity of Black stories being told on screen. The film arrived at a moment when audiences and critics were beginning to expect more sophisticated and varied representations of Black American life and entertainment, and a broad physical comedy franchise built on a gender-disguised premise was perhaps less culturally central than it had been at the turn of the millennium. Nevertheless, the film found its audience, performed well commercially. The father and stepson dynamic, family structure in Black America. One of the most culturally significant aspects of Big Mommas, Like Father, Like Son is its focus on the relationship between Malcolm Turner, who is the stepfather, and Trent Pierce, who is his stepson. The fact that Malcolm is a stepfather rather than a biological father is not incidental to the story. It is central to the emotional tension that drives the narrative, and gives the film its underlying seriousness beneath the comedy. This dynamic reflects something real and important about the question of what it means to be a father or a father figure to a child who is not biologically yours is one that carries enormous emotional weight in any cultural context, but it has a particular resonance in African American communities where, for a complex set of historical, social, and economic reasons, the structure of family life has often involved configurations that do not fit the traditional nuclear model. Malcolm's deep investment in Trent's future, his insistence on college education, his protectiveness, and ultimately his willingness to put himself in extraordinary physical and professional danger to keep Trent safe, all speak to a model of fatherhood that is defined entirely by love and commitment rather than by biological connection. The film uses the comedy of their shared undercover mission as a vehicle for dramatizing the process by which a stepfather and stepson move from friction and mutual misunderstanding toward genuine mutual respect and affection. The education versus music career conflict at the heart of their disagreement also reflects the generational and cultural tension that has been very real within Black American communities across the post-civil rights era. For older generations of Black Americans who grew up during a time when access to higher education was a hard-fought achievement, and when a college degree represented an escape from poverty and discrimination, education carries a weight that goes far beyond the practical. It is a symbol of progress, of sacrifice, of the possibility of a different life. Malcolm's insistence that Trent attend Duke University rather than chase a music, Trent's perspective represents a different, and equally legitimate generational reality. Hip-hop and rap music had by 2011 become one of the most commercially powerful and culturally influential artistic forms in the world, having risen from the streets of New York in the late 1970s to global domination across 3 decades. For young Black men of Trent's generation, pursuing a career in music was not necessarily a flight of fantasy or an abandonment of serious ambition. It was a genuine and potentially extremely lucrative professional path that had been proven repeatedly by a long list of artists who had built enormous careers and cultural legacies without ever setting foot in a university classroom. The tension between Malcolm and Trent is therefore not simply a personal disagreement between two characters. Hip-hop culture and its representation in the film. The film's engagement with hip-hop culture is one of its most culturally specific and interesting dimensions. Trent's identity as a rapper, his stage name, Prodigy, his desire for a recording contract, and his belief that music is his authentic calling all situate the film within a very specific cultural moment in the history of hip-hop. By 2011, hip-hop had been the dominant force in popular music globally for over a decade. It had moved from being a form of expression. At the same time, the aspiration to become a rapper had become one of the most common dreams among young black men in America, a reality that was simultaneously a testament to hip-hop's cultural power and a reflection of the limited range of paths to wealth and recognition that young black men felt were genuinely available to them. The conversation between Malcolm and Trent about music versus education. The film's soundtrack and music elements reflect the cultural moment accurately, featuring original rap material and collaborations that were consistent with the sound and style of popular hip-hop in the early 2010s. The song produced specifically for the film and performed by Brandon T. Jackson, featuring collaboration with T-Pain, the all-girls performing arts school setting. The choice to set the undercover operation in an all-girls performing arts school is culturally loaded in ways that go well beyond simple plot mechanics. Performing arts schools occupy a very specific place in American cultural life and in the history of arts education in the United States. They represent a space where artistic talent is taken seriously as an academic discipline, where young people who might feel alienated or overlooked in conventional educational environments can find both their community and their calling. The arts school setting in the film connects to a long American tradition for the narrative of the film specifically, placing Trent in this environment is deeply purposeful. He enters the school as a rapper who dismisses formal education, and he exits it having been genuinely moved and changed by an immersive encounter with what dedicated artistic education can look and feel like. His relationship with Haley, who is passionately committed to her musical craft and who is pursuing her artistic development within the structure of a serious educational institution, shows him that education and artistic passion are not opposites, that they can coexist and even strengthen each other. This message is culturally significant. The all-girls school setting also creates the central comedic situation of the film, and gives it its particular flavor of gender-based humor. The presence of a young man disguised as a young woman inside a single-sex educational environment generates comedy that operates specifically through the violation of the social rules and boundaries that define such spaces. There is a long tradition in American comedy of humor built around the violation of gender-segregated spaces, from frat house comedies where women are the FBI and law enforcement in African American popular culture. The portrayal of Malcolm Turner as a black FBI special agent is culturally significant within the context of African American popular culture, and the complex and often painful relationship between black communities and American law enforcement institutions. Historically, the FBI as an institution had a deeply troubled relationship with Black America. Under the directorship of J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI was actively involved in monitoring, harassing, and working to undermine prominent black civil rights leaders and organizations, including Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. himself, through a systematic surveillance and destabilization program that represented one of the most troubling abuses. The character of Malcolm Turner as a competent, dedicated, heroic, and essentially good-hearted black FBI agent represents a form of cultural fantasy and aspiration that is politically interesting precisely because of this historical context. By placing a black man at the center of an FBI story and presenting him as the hero rather than the target, the Big Momma films participate in a broader trend in American popular culture of reimagining law enforcement institutions with diverse protagonists in ways that address historical exclusion and underrepresentation. This trend had been building across the 1990s and 2000s through films and television series that featured black. At the same time, the comedy of the Big Momma films relies partly on the absurdity of the FBI's methods, specifically the practice of going undercover in elaborate disguises that are so excessive they become inherently ridiculous. The humor directed at the institution of the FBI and at the elaborate lengths to which it goes to conduct Operation Georgia and the American South as filming location. The decision to film Big Mommas, like father, like son in Georgia, specifically taking advantage of the state's generous film production tax incentives, places the film within a significant moment in the cultural and economic history of American filmmaking. The state of Georgia had introduced substantial tax incentive programs for film and television productions in the years leading up to 2011, making it an increasingly attractive alternative to the much higher production costs of filming in California or New York. These incentive programs transformed Georgia, and particularly the Atlanta metropolitan area, into one of the most active film and By choosing to film in Georgia, the production also placed the story in the American South, a region with enormous cultural significance in Black American history. The South is the place where the vast majority of African Americans' ancestors were enslaved, where Jim Crow laws maintained systems of racial segregation and oppression for nearly a century after the Civil War, and where the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s fought some of its most important and painful battles. It is also setting the story of Big Momma in this geographical and cultural space, even if the film does not explicitly engage with the region's history, is not without cultural resonance. The tradition of the Southern Black church, the cooking and food culture, the specific rhythms of social life in Southern Black communities, all of these things are present in the background of the Big Momma character even when they are being played for comedy, because the archetype of Big Momma herself is fundamentally a Southern figure rooted in the specific cultural traditions of the Black American South. The Russian villain and post-Cold War American cinema. The choice of a Russian criminal gang leader as the film's primary antagonist situates Big Mommas, like father, like son, within a very specific tradition in American popular entertainment of using Russian characters as villains, a tradition that has deep roots in the Cold War era and that has persisted and evolved in interesting ways in the decades since the Soviet Union's dissolution in 1991. During the Cold War, Russian and Soviet characters served as the default villains in countless American films, television series. After the Cold War ended, the Russian villain did not disappear from American popular entertainment. Instead, the character evolved. The political and ideological dimension of Cold War villainy gave way to a new archetype, the Russian criminal or gangster who embodies a kind of amoral ruthlessness associated in the American popular imagination with the chaos and criminality that accompanied the Soviet Union's collapse and the rise of oligarchy and organized crime in post-Soviet Russia. Films and television series of the 1990s and 2000s made frequent use of this updated Russian villain figure, and the character of Cherkov in Big Mommas, like father, like son, fits comfortably within this tradition. He is not defined by ideology or political conviction but simply gender performance and social commentary. While Big Mommas, like father, like son, is primarily a broad family comedy rather than a work of pointed social commentary, the extended gender disguise at the heart of its premise unavoidably touches on questions about gender performance and social construction that have deeper cultural dimensions. The comedy of Malcolm and Trent in disguise works because the audience understands the fact that both men are able to pass convincingly as women in the social environment of the school, that people interact with Big Momma and Charmaine as fully real and fully female people, makes a subtle point about the extent to which gender is performed and read through surface characteristics including dress, voice, mannerism, and physical presentation. The film does not engage with these ideas in a particularly sophisticated or deliberate way, but they are present in the background of every scene in which the character of Big Momma specifically performs a version of Black femininity that is at once celebratory and exaggerated, a loving caricature of a culturally beloved type that is made funny by the gap between the woman she appears to be and the FBI agent she actually is. The legacy and place of the film in comedy history. Big Mommas, like father, like son, stands at an interesting intersection of several long traditions in American popular culture. It carries forward the Hollywood tradition of male performers in female disguise, the African American comedy film tradition of the 1990s and 2000s, the specific cultural authority and warmth of the Big Momma archetype within Black American family culture, and the ongoing negotiation within Black American communities between different models of success, aspiration, and identity. As the third and final film in a franchise that spanned over a decade of American life, it also functions as a kind of cultural document of its specific historical moment, capturing in amber the particular shape of early 2010s American comedy, the sound of early 2010s hip-hop, the anxieties and aspirations of a particular generation of young Black men navigating questions of education and art. The film may not be a piece of high cinema, and it does not claim to be. But it is a genuinely cultural object, embedded in and reflective of the specific world that produced it, and understanding the cultural and historical layers beneath its comedy gives it a richness and a significance that purely aesthetic judgments about its quality tend to miss entirely. Big Mommas. Like Father, Like Son, 2011, budget making and funny scenes on set. How the budget was decided, and why it was lower than the previous films. The story of how Big Mommas, Like Father, Like Son came to be made on a budget of $32 million is itself one of the most interesting and revealing behind-the-scenes stories connected to the entire production, because it speaks directly to the financial realities of the Hollywood comedy franchise business and to the personal commitment that Martin Lawrence brought to the project. To understand why $32 million was significant, it helps to put that number in context against the budgets of the previous two films. The original Big Momma's House, released in 2000, was made on a budget of approximately $30 million but carried with it the full commercial momentum of a fresh and original concept and a star at the absolute peak of his box office power. Big Momma's House 2, released in 2006, was made on a larger budget, reflecting the confidence that came from the first film's extraordinary commercial performance of over $117 million worldwide. By the time the third film was being developed and greenlit, the financial calculus had shifted. New Regency Productions, the production company behind the film, made the deliberate decision to bring the budget down for the third installment rather than maintain or increase it. This was a financially prudent choice rooted in the realities of comedy franchise economics. The general principle in Hollywood is that sequels tend to perform slightly below the original in most cases, with the gap between sequel and original performance widening with each successive installment. By the time a franchise reaches its third entry, the novelty has completely worn off, the critical appetite for the material is typically very low, and the commercial performance is usually driven almost entirely by loyalty from the original fanbase rather than by broader audience curiosity. Knowing this, the producers recognized that committing enormous resources to a third Big Momma film would represent a financial risk that was not justified by the likely commercial return. The most significant factor in bringing the budget down to $32 million was a decision made by Martin Lawrence himself. Martin Lawrence voluntarily agreed to take a substantial pay cut for this film. This was not something the studio demanded through hard negotiation or contractual pressure. It was a personal decision made by Lawrence because he wanted the film to be made and he understood that his standard salary demand would make the math too difficult for the studio to justify. For a star of Martin Lawrence's commercial standing, agreeing to work for significantly less than his market rate is a meaningful sacrifice, and it says something important about his genuine attachment to the Big Momma character and his desire to give the franchise one more chapter even if the financial terms were not ideal for him personally. It is the kind of decision that does not always receive public recognition but that fundamentally determines whether a film gets made at all. The second major factor in reducing the production budget was the decision to film the movie entirely in Georgia, specifically in the Atlanta metropolitan area. Georgia had introduced a generous film production tax incentive program in the years leading up to 2011, offering qualifying productions a transferable tax credit worth up to 30% of their qualified in-state expenditures. For a film spending tens of millions of dollars on production, this kind of tax incentive translates directly into millions of dollars of savings compared to filming in California or New York, where the combination of higher labor costs, location fees, permit costs, and union rates makes every production day significantly more expensive. The Georgia tax incentive allowed the production to stretch each dollar of its $32 million budget considerably further than it could have in any other American filming location, and this financial efficiency was what made the entire project economically viable. The principal photography of the film began in April of 2010 and ran through the following months until completion in October of 2010, with the finished film then going through post-production processes including editing, color grading, music scoring, visual effects work, and sound mixing before its theatrical release on February 18, 2011. That timeline from principal photography completion to release was relatively tight, reflecting the studio's desire to move the finished product to audiences efficiently and to minimize the carrying costs associated with a completed but unreleased film sitting in post-production for an extended period. Where the budget was spent, the major cost areas. Understanding where the money in a $32 million comedy production actually goes requires understanding the multiple layers of expense that go into creating a film from a raw script to a polished finished product ready for theatrical distribution. The largest single category of expense in any major studio production is the cost of above-the-line talent, which refers to the key creative contributors whose names appear at the top of the contract hierarchy, primarily the director, the producers, and the principal cast members. In this film, the above-the-line costs were kept manageable precisely because Martin Lawrence had agreed to his pay cut, and because the rest of the cast, while talented and well-known, were not yet at the level of the film industry's highest-paid stars. Brandon T. Jackson, Jessica Lucas, Faison Love, and the other cast members were working actors with strong credits, but not the kind of sky-high salary demands that can consume enormous portions of a production budget before a single frame of film has been shot. The second major area of expenditure in this particular production was the prosthetic makeup and costume department, which was absolutely critical to the entire premise of the film and represented one of the most technically demanding and expensive aspects of the production. The Big Momma character that Martin Lawrence inhabited required the work of Spectral Motion, a highly regarded professional special effects and prosthetic makeup company that had worked on numerous major Hollywood productions. The prosthetic suit that transforms Martin Lawrence into Big Momma is an extraordinarily complex piece of work that involves a full-body silicone prosthetic application covering his face, neck, and hands, a large padded body suit that adds significant apparent weight and volume to his frame, a full wig and hairpiece carefully styled and maintained to match the character's established appearance, an extensive makeup application over the prosthetic surfaces to achieve a convincingly realistic skin texture, coloring, and aging effect. The same process applied to Brendan T. Jackson's Charmaine character, though the specific design of that prosthetic application was different in scale and intent. Where Big Momma is meant to be read as a convincingly elderly large woman, Charmaine is meant to be read as a heavy-set young woman, and the two different prosthetic designs required different technical approaches, different materials, and different application techniques. The prosthetic makeup team working on this film had to maintain the integrity and consistency of both prosthetic applications across an entire filming schedule that ran for several months, meaning that the materials, molds, and finished pieces had to be durable enough to withstand daily use while remaining consistently convincing on camera. The silicone prosthetic supervisor for the film was Roland Blancafleur, working under the umbrella of Spectral Motion Incorporated, with Wesley Wofford serving as the prosthetic makeup designer and application specialist. These are highly skilled professionals whose expertise is extraordinarily specialized, and whose services command significant fees that reflect both the difficulty of the work and the fact that there are relatively few people in the world who can do it at a professional Hollywood standard. The daily routine of getting Martin Lawrence into his Big Momma makeup and costume was a major logistical and financial commitment that had to be built into the production schedule from the very beginning, because every day that the character needed to appear on screen began with an extensive preparation period that preceded any actual filming. Beyond the prosthetics, the costume department was responsible for designing and maintaining the full wardrobe for both the Big Momma and Charmaine characters as well as for all the other cast members across the entire production. The costume designer for the film was Leah Katz-Nelson, whose work had to balance the demands of comedy, with Big Momma's clothing chosen to be funny and recognizable, with the demands of the school environment, which required establishing a believable and visually coherent world for the all-girls arts school setting. The production designer Megan C. Rogers was responsible for creating and overseeing the physical environments in which the story took place, from the interior of the Georgia Girls' School for the Arts to the various exterior locations used for the film's action sequences and chase scenes. The music budget for the film was another significant expenditure. The score was composed by David Newman, a highly experienced Hollywood composer whose work required a full orchestral recording session with professional musicians and the associated studio time and post-production integration. Additionally, the original songs created for the film's musical performances, including the material performed by Brandon T. Jackson's character and the song released as part of the film's promotional campaign featuring T-Pain, required separate music production budgets covering studio recording, producer fees, mixing and mastering, and rights clearances. The daily challenge of Martin Lawrence's transformation. Of all the behind-the-scenes realities of making Big Mommas, like father, like son, the one that dominates every interview Martin Lawrence gave about the production is the extraordinary physical and psychological challenge of becoming Big Momma every single day. Martin Lawrence has spoken about this process with a combination of professional pride and barely concealed relief that it is over, and the details he has shared paint a picture of a creative commitment that goes far beyond what most audiences imagine when they watch the finished film. In the early days of the Big Momma franchise, when the first film was being made back in the year 2000, the daily transformation process took approximately 3 full hours from start to finish. 3 hours of sitting in a makeup chair while a team of skilled technicians applied silicone prosthetics to his face and hands, built up the padding and body suit, styled the wig, and applied all the finishing makeup layers necessary to make the character look convincingly real on camera. Martin Lawrence has said in interviews that those 3-hour sessions in the early films were genuinely difficult to endure. Sitting still for 3 hours while people work on your face and body is an experience that tests patience, physical comfort, and psychological resilience in ways that are hard to convey to someone who has never experienced it. The sheer inactivity of sitting in a chair for that length of time, combined with the physical discomfort of having your face covered in silicone prosthetics that limit your natural expressions and make ordinary actions like drinking water or having a conversation significantly more complicated, creates a kind of slow-building tension that experienced actors learn to manage but never entirely eliminate. By the time the third film was being made in 2010, the makeup team had become so skilled and experienced with the specific requirements of the Big Momma prosthetics that they had managed to reduce the daily transformation time from 3 hours down to approximately 1 hour and 30 minutes. This improvement represented an enormous quality of life upgrade for Martin Lawrence during the production. The reduction in preparation time meant that he was spending less of his finite daily energy on the passive and demanding experience of the makeup chair and could arrive on set with more of his creative focus and physical stamina intact for the actual work of performing scenes. He has specifically credited the makeup team with making the later films survivable in a way that he genuinely appreciated, acknowledging that their efficiency and expertise directly affected his ability to deliver the performances required of him. Even with the reduced preparation time, the physical demands of wearing the Big Momma prosthetics and padding throughout a full day of filming were considerable. The padding and suit that create Big Momma's large physical silhouette add significant weight and bulk to Martin Lawrence's actual frame, and carrying that extra weight through an entire filming day that might include physical comedy scenes, chase sequences, and other demanding physical performance requirements is genuinely exhausting. Martin Lawrence mentioned specifically that a scene in the film in which Big Momma appears wearing only a sheet was particularly challenging, because maintaining the absolute physical stillness required for the scene while wearing the full prosthetic suit and body padding under the hot lights of a film set demanded a level of physical discipline and endurance that went beyond the normal requirements of acting. During that specific scene, the production team kept fans running near Martin Lawrence between takes to help keep him cool and comfortable enough to continue, a small practical detail that illustrates the very real physical demands hidden behind the comedy on screen. Brandon T. Jackson's first experience in prosthetics. While Martin Lawrence had the experience of 2 previous films to draw on when approaching the demands of the prosthetic transformation, Brandon T. Jackson was doing something he had never done before. Wearing a full prosthetic makeup and padding suit for the first time over the course of an extended film production is an experience that catches most actors off guard, because nothing in conventional acting training or even in significant film experience fully prepares a person for what it actually feels like. Martin Lawrence recognized this and gave his co-star very specific and practical advice before production began. Advice rooted in his own hard-won knowledge of what the process required. The central piece of advice Lawrence gave to Jackson was about physical stillness and energy conservation. He told Jackson directly that once he was in the full Charmaine makeup and costume, he needed to resist his natural impulse to move around, play on set, engage with people around him, and generally express his energy in the physically active and exuberant way that was completely natural to him as a performer and as a person. The reasoning was practical and based on Lawrence's own experience. The prosthetics are elaborate and precision-applied pieces of work. Excessive physical movement, particularly exuberant and uncontrolled movement, stresses the prosthetic applications at their edges and contact points, can cause adhesion to loosen or lift in visible ways, and generates heat that accumulates uncomfortably within the suit and padding. By the end of a long filming day in which the wearer has been moving around energetically, the prosthetics are in a compromised state, and the person inside them is genuinely uncomfortable. Lawrence's advice was simple and direct: stay calm, stay still, stay cool, and conserve your energy for the moments when the cameras are rolling. The challenge with this advice was that it ran directly against everything that was natural to Brandon T. Jackson as a human being. By all accounts from those who worked with him, Jackson was someone who brought enormous natural energy to every environment he entered. He was the kind of person who was always moving, always talking, always engaging with the people around him, always looking for ways to play and improvise and find the funny moment in any situation. Being told to suppress all of that natural energy and sit quietly in a corner between takes was genuinely difficult for him, and by his own admission and by accounts from others on set, he struggled with it significantly during the early weeks of production before eventually finding a way to manage the demands of the situation. The contrast between his naturally explosive personality and the discipline required by the prosthetic work created its own kind of comedy for everyone on set who watched him trying and often failing to stay still and calm while dressed as Charmaine. The funny moments on set. The behind-the-scenes atmosphere on the set of Big Mommas, like father, like son, was by all accounts one that generated a great deal of genuine laughter, irony, and absurdity that existed entirely separately from the scripted comedy appearing on screen. When you have 2 grown men wearing full prosthetic female disguises walking around a film set surrounded by a crew of dozens of people going about the serious technical business of making a movie, the potential for genuinely funny real-life moments is essentially limitless, and the production took full advantage of that potential on a daily basis. One of the most consistently funny recurring situations on set was the practical difficulty of 2 men in full female prosthetic disguise trying to do the ordinary things that people do between takes on a film set. Simple activities like eating lunch, drinking water, using the bathroom, or sitting down to rest all become significantly more complicated and considerably more comedic when a person is wearing a large padded bodysuit with a full silicone prosthetic face application. The practical rituals that the makeup and costume teams had to develop around these ordinary needs created a kind of backstage comedy that the crew found endlessly amusing, particularly in the early weeks of production before the routines became normalized. Martin Lawrence eating his lunch while in full Big Momma costume, carefully managing food and drink in a way that would not compromise the prosthetic work that had taken 90 minutes to apply, was apparently a sight that never fully stopped being funny regardless of how many times the crew witnessed it. The dynamic between Martin Lawrence as Big Momma and Faison Love as Curtis Cool, the security guard who pursues Big Momma romantically throughout the film, was a source of considerable on-set hilarity that extended well beyond the scripted scenes. Faison Love is by all accounts one of the most naturally funny and improvisationally gifted performers to work with, someone who rarely misses an opportunity to find the comedic possibility in any situation. The idea of his character being romantically attracted to Martin Lawrence's character required both actors to commit to a dynamic that was inherently absurd, and the two men apparently found multiple ways to push that absurdity into territory that was even funnier than what appeared in the final film. Multiple takes were reportedly ruined by one or both actors breaking into laughter at particularly extreme moments in the romantic pursuit scenes, and the outtakes from those sequences were described by crew members as some of the funniest footage captured during the entire production. Brandon T. Jackson's difficulty maintaining the Charmaine character consistently between takes became a recurring source of amusement on set. Jackson is a natural performer whose instinct in any situation is to be funny and engage with the people around him, and the female voice and mannerisms required by the Charmaine disguise were difficult for him to maintain outside of the formal structure of a filmed scene. There were numerous moments during the production where Jackson would slip out of the Charmaine voice and back into his natural speaking voice in the middle of a conversation with a crew member, or where a physical gesture or posture he defaulted to while relaxing between takes was so unmistakably masculine that everyone around him would burst out laughing, followed by Jackson himself dissolving into laughter at the absurdity of his own situation. The school setting of the film, in which both characters were supposed to be convincingly accepted as female by all the students and faculty around them, created specific on-set comedy of its own. Many of the background actors populating the school environment were actual students and local dancers from the Atlanta area who had been brought in to give the school setting an authentic energy, and their reactions to Martin Lawrence and Brandon T. Jackson walking around in full female disguise between takes varied from genuine bemusement to outright hilarity depending on whether they had been briefed about what to expect. For those who arrived on set for the first time and had not fully understood what the production involved, the sight of a fully costumed Big Momma walking through a school corridor surrounded by camera equipment and lighting rigs was apparently a reliably startling and funny experience. The physical comedy sequences in the film, particularly the scenes involving chases and physical confrontations, generated their own category of behind-the-scenes hilarity simply because of the inherent absurdity of a large padded prosthetic elderly woman running, jumping, and engaging in stunt work of any kind. Coordinating stunt doubles with regular performers while maintaining the visual consistency of the prosthetic costumes required careful planning and a great deal of problem-solving by the stunt coordination team. And the rehearsal processes for these sequences were apparently filled with moments where the collision between serious professional stunt work and the complete absurdity of the visual situation created comedy that no one had planned for. Martin Lawrence also noted in interviews about the production that while he and Brandon T. Jackson had a very positive and genuine professional relationship during filming, their off-set social lives were almost entirely separate during the Atlanta shoot. Lawrence explained that the physical and psychological demands of playing Big Momma were so comprehensive and so exhausting that at the end of each filming day, his only desire was to return to his accommodation, review his lines for the following day, and rest as completely as possible before the cycle began again the following morning. This created an interesting dynamic on set because Jackson, being younger and considerably less trained by his costume requirements, had much more energy and social appetite after filming days concluded, but his co-star and mentor was simply not available to participate in any off-set socializing. The contrast between Lawrence's necessary discipline and recovery routine and Jackson's natural desire to keep the energy going after the cameras stopped was itself a kind of real-life echo of the generational dynamic between their characters in the film. The extended cut and the additional scenes. One of the more interesting aspects of the film's production is the existence of what was marketed as the Motherlode Edition, an unrated and extended cut of the film that was released on DVD and contained approximately 5 minutes of additional footage that had been shot during the principal photography but trimmed from the theatrical version during the editing process. The decision to shoot more material than would ultimately appear in the finished film is standard practice in Hollywood production, where the general assumption is that you always capture more than you need so that the editorial process has options and can make the best possible version of the film from the available material. The extended footage included in the Motherlode edition consisted primarily of a song and dance musical number that had been filmed but cut from the theatrical version, along with slightly longer edits of various scenes throughout the film that had been trimmed for pacing reasons during the theatrical cut editing process. The musical number that was cut from theaters but included in the extended edition is particularly interesting because the film's musical elements were one of the aspects of the production that attracted the most genuine creative interest from those involved in making it. The performing arts school setting naturally demanded musical content, and the production had invested real effort and creative energy into developing the musical performances that appear in the film. The fact that an entire additional musical number was shot and then cut suggests that the production was genuinely exploring whether the film might work more effectively as a comedy with significant musical elements, a direction that would have aligned it with the popular musical film trend of that era represented by the success of High School Musical and the television series Glee. The editing of the film was handled by Priscilla Ned Friendly, who worked with director John Whitesell to shape the raw material of the production into the final theatrical cut that audiences saw. The editorial decisions made during post-production, including the choice to trim certain scenes and cut the additional musical number entirely, reflected the ongoing negotiation between the comedic and musical elements of the film, and the need to maintain a pace and tone that would keep the story moving and the audience engaged. The theatrical cut at 107 minutes represented the editor's and director's best judgment about how to balance all of those competing demands within the constraints of a PG-13 rated family comedy. The Georgia filming experience and its effect on the production. Filming in Atlanta, Georgia, for several months had a specific effect on the texture and atmosphere of the production that went beyond simple logistics. Atlanta in 2010 was a city in the middle of a significant transformation in its relationship to the film and television industry. The tax incentives that brought this production to Georgia were simultaneously attracting dozens of other film and television productions to the state, creating a growing infrastructure of local crew, technical talent, equipment suppliers, and support services that made Atlanta increasingly competitive with the traditional Hollywood production hub of Los Angeles. For a production like Big Mommas, like Father, like Son, filming in Atlanta meant that the background actors, extras, dancers, and local talent who populated the school environment came from Atlanta's own rich artistic community. Many of the young people appearing in the school scenes were genuine performing arts students from the Atlanta area, people who were actually studying music, dance, and theater in real performing arts programs in the city. Their presence gave the school's sequences a kind of authentic energy that a cast entirely drawn from professional extras could not have replicated, and director John Whitesell made deliberate use of that authenticity in staging the musical and performance scenes. The city's own character, its warmth, its southern identity, and the particular rhythm of life in Atlanta compared to Los Angeles, also influenced the daily experience of the production in subtle ways. Cast and crew members who had worked primarily in Los Angeles or New York before found Atlanta to be a different kind of working environment, one with a different pace and a different social dynamic that some found refreshing and others found disorienting. Martin Lawrence, who chose to essentially not engage with the social life of the city at all during the production, navigated the Atlanta location as a kind of professional isolation chamber, focused entirely on the demanding work of playing Big Momma and recovering from that work on a daily cycle. The box office performance measured against the budget. When the finished film was released on February 18, 2011, it opened in 5th place at the domestic box office, earning approximately $16.3 million in its opening weekend from 2,821 theaters across the United States. For a film with a production budget of $32 million, opening to $16.3 million in its first weekend represented a solid if not spectacular start, covering roughly half the production budget in a single weekend from domestic ticket sales alone. This kind of opening performance for a broad family comedy with an established brand suggested that the audience for the film was there and engaged, even if it was not the massive opening that a first installment of a fresh franchise might achieve. As the film continued its theatrical run, it accumulated a total domestic gross of approximately $37.9 million, slightly exceeding the production budget on domestic sales alone. The international performance added another approximately $44.7 million, bringing the total worldwide gross to approximately $82.7 million. Against a production budget of $32 million, this worldwide total represented a return of more than 2.5 times the investment in production costs alone, a commercial outcome that by any reasonable measure constituted a financial success. The film had not crossed the $100 million threshold globally, which would have been the number that generated serious enthusiasm for a fourth installment, but it had returned a clear and respectable profit for the studio on relatively modest creative investment. The fact that the film did not lead to a fourth Big Momma production was therefore not simply a matter of financial performance. The film was profitable. The reason the franchise ended here was more about the broader cultural shift happening in Hollywood comedy at the time, specifically a movement away from high-concept prosthetic comedy toward more naturalistic and improvisationally driven comedies that were generating both critical praise and commercial success in the early 2010s. The landscape of comedy filmmaking was changing in ways that made the carefully crafted physical comedy of the Big Momma franchise feel slightly out of step with the direction the genre was moving, and the studio made the judgment that investing in a fourth installment would mean swimming against a cultural current that was moving in a different direction. That is the complete behind-the-scenes breakdown of the budget-making process and the funny on-set moments from Big Mommas. Like father, like son. If you enjoyed this kind of deep dive into the production side of filmmaking, please like this video because it directly helps us create more content like this for you. Share it with anyone who loves understanding what really goes into making a Hollywood film beyond what appears on screen. And if you have not subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell notification right now so you never miss a single upload from us. We appreciate every one of you, and we will see you in the very next video.